My favored sister absconded with my $30,000 Rolex. My parents defended her shamelessly, and then Grandpa, an unyielding war veteran, appeared holding a gasoline can, plunging the room into an intense, chilling silence as he confronted the betrayal and injustice in our family. My favored sister absconded with my $30,000 Rolex. My parents defended her. Then Grandpa appeared holding a gasoline can. An absolute hush fell over the room. She pilfered my $30,000 Rolex, then fixed me with an unwavering gaze and adamantly asserted her innocence. My parents declared I was overreacting. But when my 78-year-old grandfather, a seasoned war veteran, emerged clutching a fuel can with an intense resolve in his eyes, the room descended into profound silence. This was no longer merely about a timepiece. It was a confrontation concerning truth, respect, and the establishment of a boundary, even if it meant irreparably damaging the family unit. My name is Ethan. I am 30 years old and work as a software developer in San Jose, California. I occupy a 4-bedroom residence in the suburbs with my grandfather, Walter. This property was acquired 3 years prior with my own earnings after 5 years dedicated to various computer enterprises in Silicon Valley. We currently experience a serene and fulfilling existence. My grandfather is 78 this year, yet he remains remarkably robust, keenly perceptive, and refreshingly candid. He's a decorated veteran with an uncompromising and no-nonsense disposition. He will not countenance injustice. My granddad and I share a profound connection. He comprehends me best and has consistently championed my pivotal life choices. Previously, in addition to Grandpa, my parents and younger sister Belle resided at this house. However, a significant familial discord arose precisely 1 year ago, compelling me to make the most agonizing decision of my life. My story commenced exactly 1 year prior. It was a typical weekday in early July, and I was immersed in thoughts of a burgeoning project at my office. My smartphone suddenly commenced vibrating with an incoming communication. I observed the display and saw Grandpa Walter's name appear. I responded instantaneously, greeting him with my customary, "Hey, Grandpa." He interrupted me with an impassioned, agitated tone. "Ethan, I just saw Belle emerge from your room. She had a watch in her hand." Hearing that jolted me profoundly. My pulse quickened dramatically in my chest. I hurriedly thanked him and disconnected the call, my thoughts spiraling in a whirlwind of possibilities. With trembling hands, I activated the home security application on my smartphone. Time seemed to decelerate as I rewound the footage from earlier that afternoon. Then, my worst fears materialized on the screen. Belle slipped covertly into my room and proceeded directly to the glass display case containing my cherished timepiece assemblage. I paused the footage and zoomed in. My throat constricted as I realized the watch she had appropriated was my Rolex Submariner date, appraised at $30,000. It was the most valuable horological possession I owned, acquired just a few months prior to mark my professional advancement. It wasn't solely about the monetary value. That watch was a testament to years of endeavor and personal victory. As I finished scrutinizing the film, another detail struck me. In my haste to depart for work that morning, I neglected to secure my bedroom door, an oversight I never commit. Belle was able to gain entry unnoticed due to one thoughtless moment. Sitting in my office, I felt torn by conflicting emotions. On one hand, the surveillance footage was unequivocal. Belle had stolen from me. But on the other hand, part of me clung to the possibility, holding out hope that she had simply borrowed it to look at and would return it later. I even considered if I should alert law enforcement immediately. I looked up at the wall clock. Only 2 hours remained in the workday. I opted to defer action. I still wished to believe Belle could bring it back. I attempted to focus on completing my remaining tasks, but my thoughts incessantly whirled, wondering about what she had done and what would transpire next. When work officially concluded at 5 p.m., I immediately packed my desk and departed the office with determined haste. My heart pounded intensely the entire journey home, not merely from trepidation, but also from a faint flicker of optimism that perhaps, just perhaps, I had misinterpreted everything. When I eventually drew into the drive, I saw it was just Grandpa and myself at home. My parents and Belle had not returned yet, and the residence felt unsettlingly hushed. Without wasting a second, I parked and bolted indoors, ascending directly to my chamber in the final, desperate hope that everything was a misunderstanding. My hands quivered as I unlatched the glass cabinet. And there it was, the unvarnished, dreadful reality. The watch was gone. A wave of indignation and disillusionment engulfed me at that instant. The Rolex Submariner date was more than simply an ostentatious luxury artifact. I had meticulously safeguarded it in my bedroom's display case, treating it as a prized possession. I reserved it solely for significant events, and Grandpa comprehended how much it meant to me. He would continually encourage me to treat it like gold. I remembered Belle standing in front of the case, marveling at the collection with that unmistakably covetous gaze on her face, continually querying the valuation of the most valuable timepiece. That unhealthy covetousness had always made me anxious, and I had admonished her repeatedly, "Do not touch anything in my room, particularly the watches." But after what transpired today, it was evident she disregarded these admonitions. Candidly, I felt no astonishment. This was the predictable outcome after years of parental indulgence. Belle had consistently been shielded, absolved, and rarely held accountable for her acts. Standing before that empty display case, it felt like my world seemed to crumble. Not only had I forfeited something invaluable, but I also discovered I had been betrayed by my sister, whom I had always cherished and confided in. To help you fully comprehend the genesis of this predicament, I need to tell you about my family members and the events that culminated in this debacle. My father, Richard Miller, is 55 and has been in the insurance sector for almost 30 years. His earnings are modest, but he is perpetually beset by fiscal strain. What disturbs me the most is his detrimental habit of exceeding his financial capacity, expending more than he earns, and failing to cultivate fiscal prudence. My mother, Elaine Miller, is 53 and works part-time at a tiny neighborhood bookshop. Her income is inadequate to sustain fundamental living costs. She is inherently empathetic and impressionable. Then there's my younger sister, Belle Miller. At the time, she was 22 years old and about to graduate from college. Belle had been coddled by her entire lineage growing up. Thus, she developed a self-absorbed disposition and an affinity for opulent possessions. Anything resplendent, costly, or designer-branded instantly captivated her interest. In 2023, my parents depleted their entire savings due to an unfortunate speculative venture with a friend. They were obliged to divest the property that Grandpa had given them years before to settle their liabilities. When the house was gone, they had nowhere to go. They were essentially dispossessed. In desperation, my parents approached me and requested temporary asylum while they attempted to regain financial stability. Initially, I unequivocally declined. I understood my family's dynamics intimately and wished to preserve my tranquil existence from upheaval. But then they pulled their ultimate card. They invoked the presence of Grandfather Walter. He was living with them at the time, and the prospect of my grandfather's suffering fractured my determination. Finally, I consented to housing the entire family without charge, assuming that this would be a provisional arrangement while they resolved their affairs. At first, all appeared harmonious. We collaboratively managed household duties and shared living quarters amicably. However, gradually discord began to emerge. Belle commenced soliciting funds from me, first for textbooks, then for tuition, and then for personal necessities. I extended financial aid because I wished to assist, but she never reimbursed me. And whenever I broached the subject, she always found a way to evade the topic. Whenever I voiced dissent, my parents would swiftly intercede on her behalf with their customary refrain, "The family needs to understand each other." They were perpetually fabricating justifications for her behavior, which instilled in me feelings of self-reproach and insensitivity. Things spiraled beyond control when Belle started appropriating my belongings. It began with my laptop. She asserted hers was inoperable. Then my headphones. Then something else. Whenever I caught her, she offered an expedient rationale and pledged its restitution, but she never did. My apprehension reached its zenith approximately a month before the watch incident. Belle infiltrated my room and surveyed the collection of timepieces inside the glass display case. Her gaze illuminated with an alarming intensity. She was enthusing about how lovely they were and querying the valuation of each one, particularly the Rolex Submariner date. After that, I felt obligated to safeguard my possessions. So, I installed a concealed surveillance device directed right at the cabinet containing my watch collection. I never anticipated that unassuming camera would yield such crucial evidence, the one that captured unequivocal high-definition footage of Belle appropriating my Rolex. Around 6 p.m., the front door opened, indicating my parents' return. Belle strolled in less than a minute later, likely meticulously coordinating her arrival to circumvent suspicion. When they entered the living room, all three were surprised to discover Grandpa and me quietly awaiting them. Typically, I would be engaged in personal ablutions or leisure in my room at that time. When everyone arrived home, I requested they take seats on the sofa because I had something important to discuss. The ambience instantly grew strained. Grandpa sat in his usual armchair, scrutinizing each person intently with his keen, discerning stare, as if he could decipher every nuance of their visages. When everyone was seated, I initiated the dialogue that would prove pivotal. I looked each of them in the eyes and calmly inquired, "My Rolex went missing today. Does anyone know anything about it?" Belle's reaction to my statement was exaggerated, a blatant feigned surprise. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe you just misplaced it." My folks interjected as well, appearing agitated, as if genuinely distressed by the disappearance. Endeavoring to feign solicitude, my mother inquired, "Are you sure it's missing? Maybe you just forgot where you put it. And my father contributed what appeared to be a plausible conjecture. Could it be in the office? Perhaps. But something about their reactions felt peculiar, excessively rehearsed, and unnaturally composed. I watched them, then returned my gaze to Belle and inquired again, locking eyes with her. Are you sure you know nothing? She persisted in her prevarication, striving to project indignation. Why would you accuse me? I would never remove your belongings. Then my father intervened to champion her. Are you accusing Belle? That is preposterous. At that point, I realized it was time to discontinue the pretense. I deliberately extracted my phone from my pocket and activated the security camera application. The room fell into absolute stillness. I looked at Belle once again, my voice gentle yet firm. Then explain it. I rotated the device and initiated playback. The TV displayed unequivocal high-definition video of Belle infiltrating my room at exactly 3 p.m. that afternoon, reaching inside the display case and appropriating the Rolex. The evidence was irrefutable, unambiguously manifest. Despite the proof on my phone screen, Belle recklessly attempted to refute it. She murmured with urgency, I was just in your room getting something else. That flimsy excuse ignited my fury. I fast-forwarded through the footage until she unlocked the glass case and deliberately reached for the timepiece. The video was impeccably clear. There was no misunderstanding her intention. My voice chilled considerably as I requested, something else, huh? Then why is it the most expensive watch I own that you accidentally took? Instead of allowing her to respond, my parents intervened to protect their cherished offspring. My mother promptly interjected, appealing, Belle probably only wanted to borrow it. She had no intention of pilfering, dear. My father also weighed in, acting as though I was overreacting. This is a family matter. Is it necessary to exaggerate the gravity of the situation? Hearing them unquestioningly defend Belle caused something within me to fracture. I exploded. Borrow without asking? Covertly entering another's private space and appropriating their possessions? That is theft. Belle erupted into tears the moment she perceived the situation turning adverse. I just planned to borrow it for a few days. I didn't mean any harm. Of course, whenever their offspring whimpered, my parents rushed to her side with predictable alacrity. My father quickly said, see, she just wanted to borrow it. Do not magnify this into a significant issue. Then, at the zenith of the confrontation, Grandpa Walter, who had been observing the proceedings in silence the entire time, spoke. His voice was measured, yet resonated with immense gravity. 22 years old, and still don't know right from wrong. That sentence reverberated through the room like a sonic boom. Everything went silent. I recognized the opportune moment and extended my ultimate proposition. I fixed Belle with an unwavering gaze and said, give the watch back, and I'll let this go. Instead of expressing regret, Belle retorted, her voice unyielding and intractable. I told you I was going to return it after a few days. That was it. The final thread of my forbearance ruptured. My voice was resolute, unequivocal, and commanding enough to elicit universal stillness. Give it back now, or I'm calling the police. That warning landed like an explosive charge. For the first time, everyone in the room understood I was not feigning resolve. When they could no longer deny the truth, and I threatened to alert the authorities, the entire family seemingly pivoted to an entirely different strategy, exploiting familial bonds to induce culpability. My father responded in a tone that implied I was overstating the circumstances. Ethan, don't blow this out of proportion. Belle was going to borrow it for a few days. Following that, my mother appended a moralizing discourse. Family is supposed to support one another, not seek legal recourse against one another. When Belle saw her parents protecting her, she burst into tears and remarked in a voice that made it appear as though I was the perpetrator of cruelty. It's just a watch, Ethan. Do you have to create such a significant spectacle over this? My father intensified the emotional manipulation, perceiving its efficacy. He explained that sharing is customary in a family. What you're doing is dismantling this family unit, Ethan. Hearing all of this was akin to being assailed by a swarm of stinging insects. They were trying to portray me as the antagonist, as if I was unfeeling and indifferent for merely presuming to demand what was rightfully mine. While everyone was arguing, I realized Grandpa was still sitting quietly in his armchair, observing every word and action. But the intense resolve in his eyes and the vice-like grip his hands maintained on the armrest told me everything. He was incensed. Grandpa was never the kind to readily display emotion, but what was happening in front of him, his granddaughter pilfering and then being covered and justified by her parents, had pushed him past his breaking point. I knew Grandpa would deem this conduct unacceptable. With everything he'd witnessed and endured, he saw the distinction between authentic affection and detrimental permissiveness. The atmosphere in the parlor grew oppressively heavy, and it affected me profoundly. I was standing solitary before my assembled family as they endeavored to trivialize the larceny. Grandpa said nothing more after witnessing Belle's recalcitrance and my parents' unwavering defense of her. He suddenly rose from his armchair and departed the parlor wordlessly. His movements were deliberate, yet infused with a palpable intensity that everyone could sense in the air. I saw him proceed directly to the exit, then to the modest utility shed at the perimeter of the property. A strange premonition of calamity settled in my chest, as if some calamitous event was imminent. Meanwhile, my parents and Belle continued to argue with me, unaware of Grandpa's departure. They just persisted in reiterating the identical justifications and platitudes concerning kinship and absolution, as if their repeated utterance would somehow legitimize the theft. I was not merely perturbed, I was emotionally depleted. Not only was the watch gone, but my family was distorting reality to cast me as the malefactor for simply asserting my rightful claim. Resounding footsteps echoed from the rear door about 5 minutes later. As the dispute continued to escalate, there was a peculiar quality to the sound that prompted everyone to cease conversation and look about. Then, Grandpa walked in, and what we beheld stunned everyone present. He bore a crimson gasoline container, which he used to power the lawnmower. His demeanor was grave. His gaze was chilling and fixed upon each of us. He uttered no word, offered no gesture of explanation. He merely stood there, grasping the fuel canister. The parlor descended into utter silence. Nobody ventured to audibly inhale. Not a soul stirred. The sole audible sound was the rhythmic tick of the wall clock, which reverberated through an atmosphere so taut, the very air seemed to stagnate. When they saw Grandpa standing there with the gas can in his hand, the entire family petrified like effigies. No one could fathom the scene unfolding before us. My father faltered, his voice trembling, "Dad, what are you doing?" But Grandpa offered no reply. He just continued to stride deliberately towards the front garden. Every stride was weighty, systematic, and imbued with a chilling determination. We trailed him like automatons, utterly mute, advancing only when compelled by instinct. Outside in the driveway were two vehicles, my parents' silver Toyota Camry and Belle's red Honda Civic. Then Grandpa commenced his action. He swiftly unsealed the fuel can and began dispensing gasoline over the Toyota from the bonnet to the trunk. The pungent chemical aroma of hydrocarbons saturated the atmosphere. My mother shrieked in dismay, "Dad, what are you doing? Please stop." But Grandpa remained unperturbed. He moved on to Belle's Civic, saturating every surface with identical, unnerving composure, ensuring no area was untouched. Belle shrieked amidst her sobs, "Grandpa, please don't. That's my car. I need it for school." My father, now consumed by panic, lunged forward to intervene. "Dad, please. We can sit down and talk this out." That's when Grandpa halted. He deliberately rotated to confront his son, my father. His gaze icy. The entire yard fell into absolute quietude. With a voice like tempered steel, Grandpa asked, "In this family, sharing each other's things is normal, right?" Everybody collectively held their breath. My father had invoked this very assertion merely moments prior to vindicate Belle's conduct. After a few seconds of discomforting quietude, Grandpa surveyed everyone with eyes blazing with fury. Then said, "Then these two vehicles are now my property. I can use them however I want." With that, he carefully extracted a lighter from his breast pocket, clutching it firmly in his grasp. That single action plunged the entire family into utter pandemonium. When my father and Belle saw the lighter and Grandpa's fingers, they both shrieked in terror. My father shouted, his voice quivering, "Dad, please don't. We were wrong. I'm sorry, Dad." Belle wept uncontrollably, her voice constricted with dread. "Grandpa, please don't burn my car. I'm sorry. I know I messed up." But Grandpa stood motionless, stoic and frigid. He gingerly elevated the lighter, his thumb hovering over the flint wheel. At that moment, time itself seemed to suspend. Then he commanded, "Kneel." My father and Belle froze, utterly dumbfounded. They stared at him, eyes wide with incredulity, as if they could not conceive that this septuagenarian had uttered such an imperative. Seeing them still immobilized, Grandpa reiterated, louder and more incisively. I said, "Kneel." The command struck with definitive force. My father, Richard Miller, who had always considered himself the head of the household, descended to his knees on the cold earth. His hands quivered, his voice fractured. "I'm sorry, Dad. I know I was wrong." Belle remained upright, her face awash with tears. Grandpa turned to her, his gaze cold and devoid of clemency. "Not kneeling? Fine, then say goodbye to your car." He pushed his hand closer to the ignition wheel, only inches away from creating a spark. With a single flick, everything would go up in flames. Belle was so afraid, she nearly fainted. She collapsed to her knees beside my father, her entire frame trembling. My mother stood back, weeping silently, paralyzed by terror. She dared not approach. She comprehended that Grandpa had entered a state beyond all predictability or influence. Grandpa looked down upon my father, who was kneeling on the ground, and his expression was as unyielding as a judicial pronouncement. In a voice of frigid steel, he asked, "Richard, do you even know how to raise a child?" My father averted his gaze, hesitant to meet his father's eyes. In a subdued, somber tone, he responded, "I know I failed, Dad. I didn't guide Belle the right way." Grandpa nodded deliberately and issued an unequivocal command that left no space for refusal. "Then tell your daughter to return the watch and apologize to Ethan." Without demur, my father turned to Belle, his voice trembling, yet resolute. "You need to give the watch back to Ethan and apologize. Sincerely, no more excuses." What I was seeing felt like a surreal nightmare. My father and sister were on their knees before Grandpa, and the pungent aroma of petrol permeated the waning twilight air. Even while kneeling on the frigid ground, Belle hesitated to fully acknowledge her culpability. Instead of expressing regret, she continued to rationalize what she had done. She spoke in a defiant tone. "It's just a watch. Does it have to be this serious?" Hearing that, Grandpa's face flushed crimson with indignation. His eyes blazed up like fire, revealing a wrath I had seldom witnessed in him. He exclaimed, "What? Still contesting? Even now, you don't know you're wrong." Then he made a gesture as though poised to ignite the lighter. My father, now consumed by absolute terror, almost shrieked, "Belle, apologize to Ethan right now. Stop arguing." But Belle persisted in her obstinacy until the bitter end. Her voice quivered yet remained recalcitrant. "I didn't do anything wrong. I was borrowing it. I was going to give it back in a few days." Watching things unfold, I could perceive Grandpa's burgeoning fury. His hand clutching the lighter was quivering, not from trepidation, but from indignation. In an icy tone, he said, 22 years old. You still can't tell right from wrong. You pilfer, and then attempt to argue your way out of it." Then he fixed Belle with a direct, contemptuous stare. "Someone like you is unworthy of residence in this home." Belle erupted into tears again as Grandpa admonished her. Despite her desperation, she attempted to deflect responsibility. "You're just taking Ethan's side. You're not being fair." That was the ultimate provocation. Grandpa had completely exhausted his patience. He moved to light the lighter, but just then, the wail of a police siren rent the air, growing in intensity as it drew nearer. The siren struck like a sudden bolt amidst the tempest. Everyone turned to gaze down the road, where a police cruiser was drawing near the residence. A police vehicle was traversing the street in front of our house when it came to an abrupt stop. They must have perceived something amiss, alarmed by the peculiar tableau in our yard. The throng assembled outdoors, the potent aroma of gasoline in the air. 2 officers hastily disembarked from the cruiser, hands poised near their communication devices, prepared to summon reinforcement if required. As they neared the tableau, the senior officer inquired, "What's going on here?" The moment they noticed the puddles of gasoline on the ground, the lighter in Grandpa's hand, and the 2 vehicles saturated with fuel, their bearings shifted instantaneously. Both officers adopted a heightened state of vigilance. The older officer gave a stern directive, "Sir, put the lighter on the ground. Immediately." Without contention, Grandpa slowly bent down and meticulously positioned the lighter on the ground, away from the fuel-drenched vicinity. After the situation was contained, the second officer advanced and queried, "Can someone explain what exactly is happening here?" My father and Belle were still kneeling on the ground, too intimidated to stir without Grandpa's sanction. They simply looked up, their eyes silently beseeching intervention. I stepped forward and articulated clearly to the officers, "Officer, my sister stole my $30,000 Rolex. I have unequivocal security camera footage as corroboration." Following my explanation, the senior officer looked down at Belle, still prostrate, and inquired, "Ma'am, can you confirm this?" Belle responded amidst tears and trembling, "I was just borrowing it, not stealing. I was going to give it back." Upon hearing this, the senior cop shook his head and calmly elucidated, "Taking someone's property without permission is considered theft under the law." The second officer penned it, and with something appraised at $30,000, we're looking at a felony-level indictment. Then Grandpa spoke up, his voice calm yet firm. "Ethan, let her go to jail. Let her learn what it means to respect other people's property." His remarks landed like a bombshell. The whole family was aghast. My mother covered her mouth in dismay. My father glanced up in surprise. Belle sobbed as if her entire world had suddenly crumbled. After hearing the entire story, one of the cops approached me and asked, "Do you want to file an official report for this theft?" That question sliced through the tension with surgical precision. My parents gazed at me with pleading eyes, as if what I said next would determine their fate. My mother collapsed and implored, "Ethan, please don't do this to Belle. I'm begging you." Without waiting, my father interjected, his voice quivering, "Think about Belle's prospects. You can't ruin your sister's life." But instead of remorse, Belle erupted in fury, shouting, "You can't do this to me. I'm your sister." Even at this point, her insubordination ignited a fire within me. I turned, met the officer's gaze directly, and said, "Yes, I want to file an official theft report." My remarks descended like a condemnation. The entire family was stupefied, paralyzed in astonishment that I had gone forward with it. Without hesitating, the officer nodded professionally and said, "All right, we'll commence recording all details and initiating the requisite procedures." As soon as he said that, Grandpa smiled subtly and apprised me, "That's right. Let her learn what fear feels like. You cannot permit pilferers to evade retribution." His remarks struck like a definitive judgment, confirming that my decision was correct. While my parents and Belle remained stunned, I felt an unanticipated sense of liberation. Justice had at last been dispensed equitably and comprehensively. At that time, I knew one thing with certainty: my family would never be the same again. But that was the cost I was prepared to bear to uphold rectitude. After I signified my intention to lodge the report, the two officers commenced professionally compiling the case. They produced a notepad and an audio recorder, intending to document every particular of the incident. When they queried about the security footage, I extracted my phone and showed them. The video captured Belle slipping into my room and stealing the watch. Undeniable high-resolution evidence. After scrutinizing the footage and validating the evidence's integrity, the senior officer advanced towards Belle with restraints. She was still prostrate and quivering. The officer spoke assertively. "Belle Miller, you are under apprehension for grand larceny." Then he started reciting her Miranda warnings. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." Belle erupted into tears as the manacles were affixed around her wrists. She turned to me and yelled, "Ethan, please don't do this." She implored with despair. "Just give me a week. I'll give the watch back. I'm sorry. I mean it this time." Unfortunately, it was past the point of no return. The cops had finalized the apprehension process and were about to lead her to the automobile. My parents panicked when they saw their daughter being led away and pursued the police vehicle. My mother cried out, imploring, "Please, officers, she's just a young girl. Please give her another opportunity." To aid their comprehension, one of the cops calmly elucidated, theft of property valued over $5,000 is categorized as a felony under California state law. He proceeded, "She could be liable to a sentence ranging from 1 to 3 years of incarceration, depending on the court's ruling." When my mother heard that, she collapsed to the ground as if thunderstruck, weeping uncontrollably. She could not endure the sight of her daughter in restraints being placed into the police car. My father raced to assist her up, then turned back to me, his face contorted with ire. "Are you happy now? You got what you wanted." I remained silent. I didn't say anything, but he persisted, exclaiming, "You've destroyed this family, Ethan. Are you satisfied now?" Before I could speak, Grandpa Walter stepped forward and articulated on my behalf, his voice resolute and unyielding, "Ethan didn't destroy this family. Belle did. She made her choice." Grandpa's words were the last verdict, an unequivocal assertion of who was to blame for what had occurred. After Belle was taken away, and the police car drove away, we stood in front of the residence in a profound silence. The air still retained the scent of gasoline, and no one's tears had abated. Standing resolute in front of my parents, I looked them in the eye and spoke firmly. "After what transpired today, I'm requesting both of you vacate this residence. You have 30 days starting today." My parents were astounded, paralyzed with disbelief. They stood there like effigies, mouths agape and rendered voiceless. Then my father erupted, bellowing in indignation. "You're kicking your father out. Have you forfeited your moral compass?" I did not permit emotions to sway me. I continued, "In the next 3 days, you'll receive a formal notification by a certified post." Hearing it, my mother sank on the ground, imploring through her sobs, "Please, son, I'm begging you, don't do this." But I remained steadfast in my determination. I informed them, "You've resided here without charge for a year. No bills, no responsibilities. And rather than exhibiting gratitude, you defended a thief and sought to cast me as the malefactor. I cannot coexist with individuals who lack moral discernment." Hearing those statements, my father's face blanched with rage. He jabbed his trembling digit at me and said, "You'll pay for this, Ethan." But no matter how much they shrieked, wailed, or menaced, I did not capitulate. Grandpa stood there next to me, uttering no sound. However, his presence resonated powerfully. He stood beside me like a bastion of fortitude, silently, affirming the rectitude of my actions. When my parents perceived my unwavering resolve, they resorted to their ultimate maneuver, soliciting Grandpa's intervention. In desperation, my father knelt before him and entreated, "Dad, please, I'm begging you. Talk to Ethan." My mother then descended to her knees beside him, weeping and pleading, "We know we were wrong. Please give us a chance to rectify matters." Grandpa looked down upon the two prostrate before him. His expression was inscrutable, devoid of any semblance of compassion or sentiment. His eyes were glacial, as though observing strangers. After a protracted silence, he uttered, his voice crisp and devoid of emotion, "You had a full year to demonstrate your character, and you chose to champion a thief rather than championing truth and justice. Now you seek absolution? It is too late." That solitary pronouncement served as the definitive judgment, an insurmountable barrier. My parents' last vestiges of hope were extinguished. The next 30 days were the most fraught and discomfiting period this house has ever experienced. The air felt so heavy, like it could be cleaved with a blade. My parents grappled to secure new accommodations. Perpetually impeded by their constrained finances, renting in San Jose with its prohibitive costs compelled them to desperately pursue more fiscally prudent options. During that time, Belle was released on bond under parental oversight while pending trial. They amassed sufficient funds to lease her a modest, dilapidated room until her court appearance. After consulting with legal counsel, they were informed unequivocally, with such unambiguous surveillance footage, Belle has virtually no prospect of evading legal repercussions. My parents' outlook underwent a dramatic transformation during the course of those 30 days. The former arrogance and sense of entitlement they possessed dissipated. They became diffident and quiet, as if walking on eggshells in their temporary home. What was most striking was that they could not meet my gaze, nor Grandpa's. When we encountered each other inside the house, they would avert their gazes and hastily withdraw. My mother commenced preparing elaborate meals for Grandpa in an ostensible effort at belated contrition and amelioration of the atmosphere. My father, too, would periodically inquire about Grandpa's well-being, stumbling through desultory conversations like a man who had forgotten how to converse with his progenitor. But Grandpa remained unperturbed. He uttered coldly, "Now you recall respect. Only upon your expulsion do you manifest remorse." Throughout it all, I felt a peculiar and tranquil relief. It was not facile to evict them, but it was the rightful course of action, and I harbor no regret. One serene weekend evening, Grandpa and I sat on the porch, observing the crepuscular decline behind the distant hills. He suddenly turned to confront me, and his eyes had a warmth I had not perceived in a considerable duration. He gently rested a hand upon my shoulder and murmured with profound sentiment, "I'm proud of you, Ethan. So proud." At that time, my throat tightened. Commendation from my grandfather, the man I most venerated, held greater significance than anything imaginable. The 30th day had at last dawned. The sounds of packing and translocation resonated throughout the residence beginning in the early morning. My folks were completing their preparations and collecting their remaining effects. After weeks of searching, they had finally secured a modest apartment in a different district of San Jose, significantly more remote from their accustomed environs and removed from the amenities of this dwelling. The atmosphere within the house that day was oppressively hushed and taut. Nobody ventured to elevate their voice. Every movement was calculated, systematic, and almost fragile. As my mother entered the room she had called home for the previous year, she paused at the doorway. I noticed her shoulders quivering. The tears descended slowly at first, then cascaded unremittingly. She stood there serenely, gazing at the now vacant chamber, as if trying to recall every particular of what was once her home. In that instant, a complex emotion swelled within my chest. Not regret, but a peculiar juxtaposition of somberness and liberation. Grandpa Walter stood silently at the periphery of the parlor's entrance during the relocation process. He uttered no word, merely observed everything with a serene, inscrutable gaze. One could not discern his inner thoughts. Finally, the last moving vehicle was laden and departed. The sound of its engine faded incrementally down the road, leaving in its wake an almost ethereal tranquility. As we stood there, observing the truck diminish in the distance, Grandpa exhaled and murmured softly, "At last, this dwelling has regained its tranquility." Hearing him say that, I felt an immense burden lifted from my shoulders. The house was now solely for the two of us, two individuals who comprehended and esteemed one another, and I knew then with certainty I had made the proper decision, irrespective of its difficulty. The formal proceedings commenced 2 months following Belle's arrest. She was indicted for felony grand larceny in the Santa Clara County Courthouse. Grandpa and I were present in court as pivotal witnesses. Belle's defense counsel exerted every effort to mitigate the gravity of the charges. He stood and spoke to the magistrate. "Your Honor, the defendant is only 22 years old, still very young. This may have been a youthful transgression, not something that should imperil her entire future." But the prosecutor would not relent. She detailed the security footage and advanced a compelling, persuasive argument to the court. The prosecutor made a clear statement. "Your Honor, This was not a momentary lapse in discernment or an inadvertent error. The defendant orchestrated this, biding her time until the residence was vacant, and purposely infiltrated a private chamber to pilfer the most valuable possession in the house. She was fully cognizant of the timepiece's valuation and actively endeavored to obfuscate her actions subsequently. When the court solicited Belle's rejoinder, she made a feeble attempt at self-exculpation. "I just meant to borrow it for a few days. I didn't mean to steal it." The judge looked right at her and asked, "Then why didn't you ask your brother for permission before taking it?" Belle became silent. She lacked a retort to that straightforward inquiry. The judge asked what she did with the watch. At that time, Belle had to concede the agonizing truth. "I disposed of it for $12,000. I utilized the proceeds to settle credit card obligations and repay various acquaintances. I'd been expending far too lavishly." After having reviewed all the evidence, the court issued its final decision. The judge stated, "This court sentences the defendant, Belle Miller, to 18 months of incarceration." He added, "The defendant must also remit $30,000 in restitution to her brother, Ethan Miller, the full appraised value of the timepiece, in addition to $3,000 in judicial expenses." As the sentence was pronounced, Belle's parents wept unrestrainedly in court. Their laments were steeped in anguish, but they were powerless to alter the circumstance. As for me, I sat there and felt an unanticipated wave of tranquility wash over me. Justice had at last been dispensed equitably and comprehensively. Beside me, Grandpa Walter inclined forward and murmured, "That's right, son. There have to be tangible repercussions for egregious behavior. It's the sole means by which individuals learn." It's been precisely a year since the Rolex incident and the turmoil that followed. Today, Grandpa Walter and I are at peace, stable, and genuinely contented. On the professional side, I was elevated to senior software engineer at my business, and my remuneration has significantly augmented. Grandpa Walter still retains robust health. He rises early every day, reads the newspaper, and cultivates the modest garden in the rear. We have extended conversations each evening, and I value his wisdom increasingly with each passing day. My parents continue to reach out to me periodically, but our rapport has never recovered. The calls are concise, polite, and remote. I still acknowledge them as my progenitors, but the trust and intimacy we once shared have irrevocably vanished. Belle is currently serving an 18-month sentence. I have neither visited nor endeavored to communicate with her, and I have no intention to. My story about the Rolex and everything that followed concludes here. I'm not presenting this tale to garner sympathy or approbation, and I'm certainly not recounting it to dishonor my family. I'm posting it because of a deep-seated lesson I have assimilated. Sometimes genuine affection does not necessitate condoning every misstep. Sometimes true love involves establishing unequivocal boundaries and permitting individuals to confront the repercussions of their behavior. And paramountly, I wish you to grasp that family is not solely demarcated by consanguinity. Family is comprised of individuals who esteem you, champion you, and are present for you when you need them the most.